All right,
Excellent.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you so much for accommodating me. I'm so sorry not to be there in person. Slight mess up with childcare responsibilities tonight. People know how that is. I am especially sorry not to be there because I think at times like this, it's really good for one's mental health to be around people who are equally outraged at the world and lamenting at everything that's going on. To be among people who know that the true measure of our society's greatness is not found in its military might, but in how it treats its most vulnerable. And welfare, the support we provide to those in need, reflects the depth of our compassion. And, you know, like the NHS, is really a sign of our solidarity with each other. I've been thinking a lot about why this government is doing what it's doing. And of course, I know the Labour Party too well, and I know what it was like with this leadership internally, and marked my cards a few times with internal arguments about various disagreements. But I hadn't imagined that they would go this far on disability cuts. And I did get a sense, to be honest, that they would be open to defence spending and would be potentially keen on that. But I think this combination has disgusted me beyond more than I could imagine. And in a way, though, of course, it's not a surprise. It's entirely consistent with a particular worldview that this leadership of the Labour Party have. I think some people think that they're not driven by values, but they are. They're just very different values to ours. And, you know, pundits, I can see it on the news all the time. I can see the likes of Polly Toynbee saying like, oh, they don't really want to do this. I don't buy that. You know, people look at their very stupid fiscal rule and you know, how that creates a need for money and say, well, that's why they're doing it. They don't really want to do this. But this doesn't explain their choices, because they could raise money in other ways, including introducing a wealth tax. I think increasing defence spending is, you know, it's not just a reaction to Russia and what's happened in Ukraine. I think this is convenient for them because their obsession with GDP and that kind of singular goal of GDP growth that is so empty and pointless, and we've learned time and time again and across the world, and you know, so much evidence to show that it doesn't result in more prosperous societies or more equal societies or more just societies. And you certainly don't need a PhD to understand how stupid that focus is. But, you know, in a sense, their defence spending increase is allowing them to talk about the sort of switch from a green industrial strategy to a defence industrial strategy. I mean, all of this you can maybe try and say is part of a kind of futile thinking about how they're going to run this country. But I really do believe that it goes deeper. I think for welfare and what welfare represents, I think the establishment hates welfare because it represents the opposite of that profit-driven worldview. It embodies solidarity and empathy, and these are values that threaten a system built on greed. We know that capitalism thrives on convincing us that poverty is a personal failure, and that is why politicians, conservatives, and then this iteration of the Labour Party is, you know, points their finger to people on various different welfare payments, because they want to play into an idea that people are cheating the system, that there's an undeserving poor, and this is who they are. But you know, I think welfare and the support for this, and I think one of the things that's really struck me and given me hope is that even when I was on Question Time a few weeks ago and we were having this conversation, the public actually doesn't think that this is right. And it does show that we have an understanding of looking after each other, even if we're strangers, which is such an incredible sign of humanity. And I think about part of my childhood which we spent on benefits. one of three, so certainly wouldn't have voted to end the two-child benefit cap, so I would have been thrown out of the Labour Party in any case, or had the whip suspended. That period of life, growing up, I mean, if we hadn't gone on benefits, my mum went on benefits because my dad, who was a violent man, was using money to control that relationship. And so she went on benefits as she should have. And my dad left for a little period around that time as well. And that, her no longer having to rely on my dad, fundamentally shifted that relationship and gave my mum strength and took us out of danger. And I think it's really important to tell these personal stories because people have an idea of who is on welfare, who is getting payments, and they don't realize that it's everyday people. It can happen to anyone. And I, for one, am always so thankful to people for paying their taxes, for putting into that system, for supporting that system. That means that we got through that period, that, you know, I was able to carry on studying because we were going to have to move. And I mean, it would have been really difficult for my family in a massive upheaval. And I'm able to speak in this capacity as an economist, as someone that was able to, you know, do well in school today. I'm sure that was a period of, I think it was the end of John Major, and probably not what the Tories wanted to invest in terms of having another lefty. But, you know, that benefit system and those payments were so important to my family and to me. And I think people need to know that this can happen to anyone and how important this is. You know, and I spoke about this again, time and time again, and it motivated my political journey against Ian Duncan Smith, is that my mum was on disability benefits under the Tories when they were cutting them, and that dehumanising experience and watching my mum go through that really, I couldn't imagine would continue under a Labour Party. I mean, it's, you know, our family, like so many, especially Muslim families, were always Labour voters because we felt that Labour stood for people like us and would protect us. And that is certainly no more. And now we see the Labour Party abandoning its roots and trading its commitment to social welfare for a craven embrace of militarism. And the idea that this industry that actually creates relatively few jobs, especially few non-graduate jobs, and a lot of destruction and pain around the world. You know, I was just on Politics Live and a few weeks ago, and the Labour MP was saying this will help us solve regional inequalities. And that's not the case. But even if that is the case, do we want to build our economy on the basis of building parts for planes that then bomb children? I mean, that's what's happening right now. Do we want more of that? Do we want to be in a situation where we have to sell more bombs, more parts to fighter jets to countries that have no regard for human rights? I can't fathom it. I mean, this is like moral bankruptcy. And they would have us believe, this is the choice that is put before us, is that we have this choice between security and solidarity. And that is an absolute false choice. And we absolutely need to reject that. And it's not fiscal responsibility. It absolutely isn't. You can do things very differently with morals, and a nation that prioritizes this destruction over dignity, that values missiles more than it values human lives. I mean, this country honestly is just like losing its soul. And I say this country, but again, you know, it's really important to remember that so many of us are not represented in the electoral system right now. We're not represented in Parliament. Our voices are not being heard. Apart from the few handful of left Labour MPs that remain and a few others from other parties, this is just, it doesn't represent public views. But look, we cannot despair. We cannot allow the despondency that we see in our communities continue, and take this from someone that has been fighting but still feels like we need to fight on. This is really when our resolve needs to be strongest. And, you know, if I advise people about what to do in this moment, it is to talk to your neighbors, to your co-workers, to your families. People always say, don't talk to politics, talk about politics with your family, but I think we absolutely must share stories of how welfare has saved lives and changed lives, remind each other that change can come when we stand together, when ordinary people can stand together, and that actually they want us to switch off. They want us to feel isolated. They want us to be exhausted. They want us to believe that nothing can change. But every single conversation we have where we find agreement, where people also express their concern, because most of us have it, it chips away at that line. It's a reminder that we're not alone. And so, friends, our struggle continues for welfare, for peace, for the future we all deserve. And it starts with every one of us refusing to stay silent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faiza.